do you want to live your life based upon, your ideals and your principles, or do you want to do it to satisfy someone else's? And so I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. So go ahead and do it.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Getting Back Up with me, Anthony Agogo. I must apologise, I'm on my travels at the moment. I wrestled in Southampton, UK today. I got a big match in London next week before heading back to the US and carrying on my wrestling journey with AEW. With that being said, I've found time to smash out another banging episode of the Getting Back Up podcast. Today we welcome Larry V. Santana on the podcast. Larry is a film writer and director, a wonderful man. He's chosen a career in Hollywood, and Hollywood is probably the most competitive industry in the world. Tens upon tens of thousands of people every single year go to LA to try to make it in Tinseltown, and Larry did the exact same. You're going to really enjoy this podcast. Larry talks about his upbringing. He talks about his love of film and becoming a storyteller. He talks about 5 O'Clock Shadows, the movie that he tried to make. They actually cast me to play Tommy Knuckles, but unfortunately it didn't get the funding from Universal Studios, which he hoped to get, which is a massive setback. He worked for years on this production and fell at the final hurdle. And we talk about the setbacks and the rejection and overcoming said setback and rejection to muster the strength of character and desire to go at it again for the next one. You're going to love this podcast. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. Larry V. Santana, filmmaker, absolute legend, mate. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
My pleasure, mate. Thank you for having me.
I'm going to ask lots of questions today. I'm going to lots of questions. We're going to go. I have no idea where we're going to go. I've done a lot of research on you. I know we can, and I know you personally as well. Filmmaker extraordinaire. All the other stuff we're going to talk about. But the most important question I'm going to ask you is the first one, and I hope you answer very honestly. Had a bit of bad news a couple of weeks ago. How are you, mate?
I'm doing all right. I'm hanging in. I think, the bad news you're referring to is we worked on this film project together. I was paid to write a feature film for Universal, and trying to pitch myself as a director on the project, not just writing it and getting it made that way, but trying to, with my full vision of the story from top to bottom. And, I had some conversations with the studio, and we were, I thought, close to getting there, and then ultimately it didn't work out. So trying to, pivot, transition to finding a way to get it made independently. And, that's been a challenge, but I'm up for it, and I believe in the project, and I believe in the cast, including yourself, and so we'll find a way.
We'll find a way, mate. We will find a way. And that's a very good answer that you said. That sounds like I'm not saying this is, but that sounds like a very rehearsed answer. But truly, deeply, honestly, I mean, you've worked, and I know, I was one of the actors that you cast for the film, and it was amazing. And the story was so great. Like, I wanted to do it so bad, and I was a toy in there. I was a Barbie in the Barbie house. You built the house. So honestly, mate, when you get that knockback, and this is what podcast is all about, like getting off from setbacks, like, fuck, like, what's it like? Because you put your heart and soul into it. You live and breathe, you dream it, you dream character, you write the character, you can see it so clearly in your head, and somebody else goes, nope, not because of you're not good enough or because you whatever. It's a no from somebody else. You can't see your vision. How do you deal with that setback?
Well, I mean, I'll be very honest. It's heartbreaking every time. I mean, like the business is very much. I mean, rejection is kind of just part of the deal. And so, in order to anyone that I talk to that is interested in getting into the industry, I always tell them, like, you have to love this above all other things, because if there's anything else that you would even be remotely interested in doing, go do that, because it's going to be so much easier for you. Like, you have to love it, because like you got to power through so much no and so much people thinking that you're crazy and thinking that, because the thing is, I discovered, and after years in the business, it's like everyone says, we want the new fresh thing, right? And then you give it to them and they don't know what to do with it, because they want to like fall back on what's already worked. They want to say, hey, well, what's familiar? Because the industry is very risk averse now, I think more than ever, for a million reasons we can get into. But I mean, I think for me personally, like, putting my everything into this project and like just like heart and soul. Many late nights. I mean, like long hours. Just very little sleep for a long, long time. But I'm doing it because I'm so passionate. I love it so much, and so when you do that, like there's a real vulnerability there. It's like, all right, I'm saying this is me, like creatively naked. Like here it is. And then when they give it back to you, and they say no, it stings every time. It never feels good. It's never, people are like, oh, well, you become numb to it. I don't, it's, it's not good. But, ultimately you have to say, well, they didn't get it. But like, I still, as long as I see the vision and I believe in it, like all you can do is move forward. And so that's what I'm doing because there's no other way.
Yeah. And that is obviously, the vision you're talking about, specifically a movie that you want to film and direct and create. But that's indicative of life, isn't it? Like, as long as you see what you want to get, or you see where you want to get to, if you believe in it enough and you're passionate enough, go after it. No matter how many times you stumble along the way, how many no's you get. If you want it so bad, just go and get it. And it brings me on to this next thing. Okay, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions here, and it's going to be a little question pie. I don't know what I'm talking about. Goodness me, only 5 minutes in, I'm talking about nonsense already. So, Craig, what I love about you, Larry, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, and I really do mean this. I'm not one of these people that say, oh, I mean it in a nice way. I mean this in the nicest possible way. You're a dreamer. And that's what I love about you. You're a dreamer. And I love that because if you think about it, we were all dreamers once. I mean, I still am a dreamer very much, but we were all kids once. We dreamt. We had the dream. We didn't know anything. We dreamt stuff. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to go here. I want to go there. And because you're a kid, like no one says you can't do it, and you want it, and you believe in it. Then you get older, you get your dreams stamped down, you get ironed out, and you become normal and boring. And then we don't go after our dreams anymore. But what I love about you is you have a dream, you go after it. And yeah, there's been times in your life we're going to talk about where you kind of stagnated, maybe. Life began to like iron the dreams out of you, but eventually you went, no, I'm going after this. And I love that about you, mate. And that's something I really respect. And I think there's a dreamer in all of us in us. And it's whether we have the bottle, the desire to dig down deep enough and let our inner boy and girl dreamers out into the world. And man, that's I wanted to say that about you. I respect that about you, and I want to talk about your dreams and your visions. 2 questions, mate. Larry V. Santana. So it's fascinating. Someone's got like an initial with just the first letter of the V. So what is V? And also, for those that don't know who you are, we've kind of explained it already. But actually, who are you and why are we talking today?
Okay, so I'll start with the first. Well, first, thank you for saying what you said about me being a dreamer. I just want to say on that point, I think that dreamers are the ones that I think change the world, change culture. They move the needle forward, and so without the dreamers, we would stagnate as a species. I think it's the people that they call you crazy at first, but then once you prove it and say, hey, I did this thing, then all of a sudden, oh, like he's a genius. So we always knew he was going to be great. But like that is so important. I think that adulthood, especially, because like when you're kind of taught, I think conformity. It's like as you get older, it's like they kind of beat that out of you. Say, oh no, but like do the safe thing, do what's expected of you by other people. And I think you can get kind of lost. You can lose yourself in that trap of trying to fulfill other people's expectations of what your life should be. And I think that
you're not living for them. You're not living for them.
No,
you're paying taxes. No. You're doing this. You're living for them. You got to live for yourself.
Yeah.
And so on that dreaming, before you go on, that's the great point you made. The dreaming thing. Imagine this: 400 years ago, 200 years ago, 300, not that long ago, right? A couple great grandparents, great grandparents, not that long ago. Somebody else had no idea. There's going to be a plane one day. What's a plane? Oh, it's going to be a big, massive, giant hunk of metal. It's going to fly like thousands of feet up in the air. What an idiot. What an idiotic thing to think of. But somebody dreamt that and did it. Like, without dreamers, mate, we're still cavemen and women, like, not even talking to each other, with clubs getting eaten by saber-toothed tigers. Dreamers make the world go on, make the world spin. And we all got dreamers inside us. And our dreams haven't got to change the world, but our dreams can change our worlds. And again, getting back to that dream, and yeah, mate, sorry to interrupt. I think you're dead right on that one.
So to answer your question about my name, so the V stands for Victor. So I have an interesting story about like my name generally. So I'm very light skinned, but like I'm Puerto Rican. My family's from Puerto Rico originally, and so as a kid, like I always had, the name Larry. Santana is a very like Latin name, right? Larry is not so much. So I remember being a kid, like growing up in New York, like nothing but like Hispanic. There's all mostly like Black and Hispanic kids. And so having the name, like Larry Santana was like, it didn't kind of fit. And I always wondered, well, what's up? What's up with that? Why do I, where's this Larry come from? Because I've never met a Puerto Rican named Larry ever, right? Besides my dad. My dad's Larry Sr., right? So I asked my dad about it. I'm like, Dad, like, how are we both Larrys as a kid? And so going back to when my dad was born, so my grandmother was in the hospital, like about to give birth to my dad, right? And she was gonna name him Victor after my grandfather. And in Spanish, like Victor Santana. It's a very like Latin name, right? And so for some reason, and I'll never know the answer. My grandmother passed on, so rest in peace. But I'll never know the answer. But for whatever reason, my grandfather was not at the hospital at my dad's birth, and my grandmother was furious. I mean, she was pissed, right? So she goes, I'm not going to name him Victor. And so, well, the nurse who was delivering my dad says, well, what do you want to name him? She goes, how about you name the kid? And the nurse was engaged. Her fiance was a guy named Larry. She's going to marry this guy named Larry. She's like, I love Larry. Like, Larry's a beautiful name. She goes, okay, that's it. He's Larry Santana. And so then when I was born, I'm Larry the second, and the V is the Victor from my grandfather. So he's Larry and I'm Larry V.
Your nan named her son Larry out of spite.
Out of spite.
I love that,
Exactly.
man. Wow, man, I love that. I love that. Growing up in New York, I know, but well, I'm going to start with this, right? I've done some research on you, mate, and I found an amazing article I'm going to share at the end. People will learn more about you, although we'll cover most points in this. The reason I talk with your dreamer, in the first paragraph of this article, I thought, this can be a good podcast. You said, risk is what makes the juice worth the squeeze. Without it, you can never achieve anything truly extraordinary. Talk about that, mate.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
I think the risk is what if it's easy, then anyone would do it, right? If it's if the bar is so low, there's nothing special about it. Nothing, that really, like for me, I'm always trying to evolve, not just as an artist, as a creative person, but as a human being too. So it's like, I've always like sought out challenges. I think like, and throughout my life, and this has been true since as far back as I can remember, but whenever I was in a situation, say a job or any sort of situation that I was like, I'm bored here. Why am I so bored? Why am I unhappy? It was because there was like a ceiling on like, I don't know, like I wanted to reach for more and there wasn't any more there to reach for. And so I was like, well, what else is there? I don't want to become stagnant. And so I think that the reason why people celebrate, great athletes or filmmakers or, musicians or whatever is because we all have the same human limitations. And these people say, I'm going to reach beyond those limitations and create something that is truly remarkable. And everyone cheers them on and loves it because we all deep down, I think, want to strive for more. And some of us are too afraid to do it. But so when we see people that are willing to take that chance and take that risk, it's so inspirational. It becomes like, oh my God, like as someone you look to as like inspiration for whatever hard time you might be going through in your life.
You went on to say, every day, no matter how frightening or stressful, I choose risk. I choose to bet on myself because it's the safest bet I'll ever make. And I love that. And it made me think, I saw a video actually, the day I saw that, I saw a video, Eric Thomas, inspirational speaker, was talking about Kobe Bryant. Now, he didn't used to like Kobe Bryant. He never used to like him for his ball hog, never used to pass, be of a dick, didn't like him. Then he heard Kobe talk. Rest in peace, Kobe Bryant, one of the greatest ever. He heard Kobe talk, and Kobe did a speech where he's like, he was the first person in the gym. Right, every single day. He was first person in, last person leave. He'd shoot, he'd practice, he'd shoot until his fingernails were red raw. And then come to the end of the game, when there's the game winning shot on the line, he'd look around for his teammates who to pass to. He's like, he doesn't train that hard. He leaves early. He turns up late. He goes, he parties. He went, I'm taking this last winning shot. I bet on myself. If anyone's going to take this shot, I bet. And I thought, wow, I love that. Because I just... me, each of everyone listening to this, we're all we've got, really. We're all we've really got. Like, if you can't back on yourself, who can you bet on, or who can you back? And I just thought, when I read that, I thought Kobe Bryant. I just think that's amazing.
No, I think I have you have all the context about who you are. I mean, it's like I think that I can, there's a few people in my life that I trust, deeply, but like for everyone out there, it's like, who can you trust more than you trust yourself? I think that, like you have to sort of like you have to believe it within yourself first. And I think you have to sort of, trust yourself first and foremost, and then like go forward and kind of build your kind of coalition of champions, so like like your circle of people that you really trust and love to help elevate who you are and what you can become. But I think that it all starts with that core belief of like I can do this. I believe in me, and do all the things that is necessary to become the best version of yourself that you can.
And even you got to trust, even to the point where like you mentioned that coalition, like bring people around you. You've got to trust yourself to bring the right people around you, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
we have partners, spouse, parents. But I'm going to say, not saying you can't trust them. Of course you can. You should trust them. But ultimately, they may not always be around. No one knows what's happening in life. You got to back yourself. I love that, man. I love when you said that. So I think everyone listening to this last 15 minutes have heard you kind of get your vibe. So let's talk about you and your life and why you have this, why you would why would you back yourself rather than somebody else. Growing up in New York in the Bronx, I know you mentioned to me before about I don't know how much you want to kind of go into this, but your family, you were around, your family, drunks, drug addicts, criminal activity is probably the best way to describe it. And you never went down that road. What was it like being around that, seeing that on a daily basis? And why did you not go down that road?
I mean, my parents, I think, 100%. I think that, well, just for context, so like the Bronx, like, I was born in the 80s. So I was living in the Bronx in the 80s and early 90s, up until I was about 10 years old. And I think that the neighborhood that we were in was not the worst in the Bronx, but it was like slowly, like if you walked a couple of blocks, west or down that road, like, there was some pretty scary stuff going on, and there's, without getting too specific, like addiction, incarceration, violence, it affected people in my family, like personally. And so my parents, when me and my brother were growing up, they were very, very adamant about, like, hey, we want to shield you guys from that. Occasionally there'll be some spillover. I mean, like, I remember one story walking home from school one day. I must have been like 7 or 8, and my apartment building. I was walking to my apartment, and the neighbor's door, somebody like broke in and like caved in the door. So there's all this police tape around it, and the locks on the door. We had like 5, 6, 7 locks on the doors. I mean, it was like like that kind of situation. And just seeing that and like being like, okay, that's weird, but like you're taught to just like put your head down, mind your business, kind of keep moving forward. And I think like that was kind of like for my parents, they're like, we want to avoid like having the kind of life and those experiences that we had with growing up. We want to like protect you as much as we can from it. And so I think that as the neighborhood started getting a little bit worse over time, they were like, we got to get out before like it completely consumes everything. And then there's no safe place to turn. And so I think, I think, I don't know, from that point, it was kind of like, and being the older brother too, I kind of felt like, it was instilled in me very early on, like, you have to be sort of a protector, and you got to always keep your wits about you, always keep your head in the swivel, and just be ready to um to act at a moment's notice, and to be brave, to be strong. And I think and as far as I'm trying to remember your question, it was about
But how did you not go down that road that had been walked for you? Family members, I don't
oh
know who, had done
yeah, yeah.
bad stuff. Like, how did you? That's an easy route to go down when you see it every single day. How did you whip yourself from that and go for a different life? And who inspired you and why? But you mentioned your parents with the driving force, really. And I saw you read an article. You said you felt pressured to not walk down that road. Where was the pressure? From whom?
I don't know that it was explicitly said, but it was always, I kind of got the sense of like, okay, you're supposed to be, I remember growing up as a kid and like always loving books and reading. And I was known as like the smart kid. Right. And so they were like, you're the smart one, Larry, do smart things. Like your friends are, being knuckleheads in the street. They're out, running, smoking, drinking, underage. They're getting into fist fights in the street. Like, I don't want you to be that because you're smarter than that. So it was always this pressure of like, you are supposed to be more than that. And if you're not, you will disappoint me. And I never wanted to disappoint my parents because they had seen it from some of their, friends and family and just, even, I mean, I remember visiting like, an uncle in prison when I was like 6 and it was like, there was like a family room and I was like, where are we going? And like, oh, we're going to go see your uncle. He's in summer camp. And I was like, okay, I had no clue. But then, after the fact, I learned later, like that wasn't, that was not summer camp. That was prison, man. These are not normal things that I think most kids go through. But like, I saw that and like just getting sort of like that feeling of like, hey, like you have to be better than this or else like life or death kind of thing. And then we moved out of the Bronx when I was about 10 and moved to Pennsylvania. But like those first 10 years, it was so drilled into my head, like you have to be more, you have to be better, that I've taken that with me, ever since then. And even like, post New York and meeting people throughout my life that have been in, maybe not the best situations, like I was able to spot it from a mile away and say, okay, I need to stay away from that because I know what could happen. I know how bad things can get if you're not careful, or if you surround yourself with the wrong people. You can, find yourself in a really bad spot. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And so I think I give all the credit to my parents for instilling that in me and just for teaching me like there's a right way to do things, there's a wrong way, and you're too smart to do the wrong way. So don't do that.
What is it about storytelling? Like, what is it about storytelling that grabbed you, and that makes you want to kind of like, you know, display your gift to the world? What is it?
I think it's this sort of like elemental thing that goes back to like, prehistoric times when we're sitting around a campfire telling stories. I think stories are how we relate to one another. Stories are how we teach one another. And I think the stories can be life affirming. You hear a great story and it like, I don't know, it makes you feel something. It's a sort of like chemical reaction in your body that you can't, it's involuntary. Like you hear a good story and the hairs in the back of your neck stand up. You feel, I mean, to put it very simply, you feel alive. You feel, and there's a real sense of, I think, communion between people and sharing stories because like you feel this connection that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so I think stories are like just this innately human thing that we've had since the very beginning. And I think that's what sort of like we all seek out, whether we realize it or not.
Pet Cemetery scared the living daylights out of you. It
Yeah,
sounded like it did.
yeah.
Yet you specialize. Now, you tell stories, and you've told stories your life. We'll talk about some of the stories you've told, and some of your because there's a period in your life I really want to kind of dive into. It's not really movie or storytelling related. It's like you and
Hmm.
your life. I want to dive into that. So I'm really proud of you for kind of getting through these moments. But aside from that, um, Pet Sematary scared you, but you kind of specialize in the horror genre.
Hmm.
Why?
I think the horror genre to me is so interesting because like I think it operates it's like every single cinematic tool like in the kit you have to use for a good horror movie because a horror movie has to be great drama, it has to have great characters. You got to really invest in the people on screen because then if you don't care about the people on screen, then the scares they don't land the same way.
How do you invest? How do you invest in the character? How do you make? So I'm really fascinated, and I think people listening to this will be as well. How do you make an audience member invest in a character, good or bad? Is it the writing? Is it the actor and what they do? Well, what is it?
Well, I think it starts with the writing first. I mean, you have to like get it on the page and like really sort of like I think present a relatable character that's interesting. Like I don't I think the best writing is writing that is non-judgmental. What I mean by that is like you have a character, good, bad, or indifferent. Like we're all sort of like shades of gray. I think like there's no like white knight or like there is no black and white in life. I don't think it's all gray like pretty much all the time.
Like
So I
you can
think
be the
that
nicest person in the world, but still be a dick sometimes, right? You
yeah.
can be a murderer, but help an old lady across the road.
Yeah.
Everyone's a little bit grey, 100%.
Right, right. So I think if you present characters authentically in that way, like for me, it's like, the typical sort of like cliche Hollywood note is like, oh, is the character likable? And like to me, I find zero interest in that. To me, it's like, is the character interesting? Does he or she have a compelling point of view? Are they, saying things or doing things that like, are not the norm and why? Kind of like investing in the psychology of that. I think I get that love too. Like, I spent 10 years as a journalist before I got into filmmaking. And so that was all about getting into the psychology of why people do what they do. And I find people so fascinating. And so because like sometimes there's no there's no way to sort of quantify why a person does what he does. Sometimes it just eludes, you know, um explanation really. And so it's like, how do we get there?
So you brought it up, and this podcast is going to jump around because my brain jumps around a lot. So
No worries.
ADHD. You got a master's degree at Berkeley University in California
Yeah.
in journalism. You mentioned you were a journalist for
Mhm.
10 years, and the journalism you did. Explain what you did, like what you did as a journalist.
So I started off in news. So I remember being in high school and having writing classes or English classes, and I always again loved movies, loved novels, like reading books, whatever. And I always loved writing. Once I started to write, I sort of like the drawing kind of took a back seat, and it was all writing all the time. So I was like, how do I love writing, but I have no clue how to make a career at this, right? And so I think I had all these teachers at the time that were telling me, "Hey, Larry, I think you're a really good writer. Try journalism because journalism was a very kind of like low bar of entry. You can get started pretty much right away. Because like you mentioned, I want to be a screenwriter or a novelist. They were like, cool, but like that's almost impossible, or at least to them anyway. So I was like, all right, so I'll just, like I'll walk that back a bit and be a journalist. So I started off
And
in
it's harder
sports.
when you're young and impressionable. Like your teachers that you look up to, they do have an impression on you. If they
Yeah.
say to you, "Hey," like, and they're probably just trying to protect you. They're maybe because they weren't able, maybe they had to go at it and they failed. So, hey, Larry, do this because it's easier, because as you've said in many articles, like acting, the movie industry, Hollywood is probably the most competitive industry on the planet in
Yeah.
any aspect, and it's full of rejection, and they're just trying to help you in the high. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's a shame, and it's a shame how people can like bestow someone's like what they can and can't do, especially when you're so young and you are impressionable. So you talk about the journalism and stuff. You're entry into that.
So I started off in sports. So there was a tiny little like newspaper in the town I lived in the Poconos, and I started writing for like I saw the editor of the sports department in line at the supermarket. I just walked up to him. I was like, my teacher, my English teacher in high school said that I should write for papers, and I saw you and I recognized you because I read some of your columns on the sports section. I'm a writer. Like, are there any openings? And he goes, all right, like maybe we'll do an internship. So he goes, send me some samples. So I sent him like some essays I wrote in high school or whatever. And he goes, all right, like I think this is good. Come in, on Saturday, this coming Saturday, come in or whatever, and we'll kind of walk you through it. I did that for like all the rest of college. So I did that for like maybe like 3 years on and off. And it was cool. Like at first it was like, having a byline. So the byline is like, by Larry Santana, like in the paper that like, everyone in town would read. So I was like, that's really cool. But I knew that after that, I graduated college, I had a full-time job waiting for me at the newspaper. And I was like, I don't want to cover high school sports for the rest of my life. I don't want to be, writing about, like high school basketball or even like little league softball. I did that also. And I was like, I need more options, but there's not many options in this tiny little town I live in. So what can I do about that? So I was like, let me apply to grad school, but not just any grad school. It has to be like the top programs in the country. And so the top of the list was Cal Berkeley. I applied. I got in. I had never been on a plane in my life at that point. I'd never left like New York, Jersey, Pennsylvania. I think the farthest I'd ever traveled was like Connecticut, maybe. But like I'd never been outside the tri-state. And I was like, okay, well, I need to like broaden my horizons because like there's more opportunities out there. So I applied to Berkeley, got in, and I was like,
Of what? Of what credentials? Of your ability in college? Your degree?
yeah. So I had to send them a bunch of clips of like my newspaper articles that I wrote. Like, because like the grad school program was kind of built for people that were kind of already professionals, already working. So I knew that like I didn't have as much experience as probably some of my classmates would. So I was like, I need to like have great grades in college, and I need to accumulate as many clips as possible to show them, hey, I do this like in real life, for a real newspaper. So I did that, got in, and then sight unseen, never been to California in my life. Hop in a plane, I go, and the funny thing was, I get there and I'm like, my mission at the time was like, I want to be like the best, like, newspaper journalist around. And I want to, write for the New York Times or some big paper and, win a bunch of awards and be that guy. And then when I got to grad school for journalism school, there was a TV department and there was loads of all this gear. It was cameras and lights and microphones that I could use for free. And it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I can use this whenever I want to. And they're like, yeah, you're a student, like go nuts. Like editing bays, everything, like really like, like professional equipment. And so I immediately was like, well, let me start shooting some stuff, kind of see what happens. And it sort of reignited, it reminded me that, hey, like you love movies and you want to do this. This might be like a little spark of something that could be maybe pushed you in that direction. And so that's how it began. And I remember they like vividly, I had we would shoot these like assignments. It was like, we'd shoot these, like news packages. So it was like, go out and do a story about some local person, 2 to 3 minutes, shoot it, edit it, and then we'll play it in front of the class. Right. And like kind of like a screening. And so I came back, shot some stuff, came back. And I remember that my classmates were like, oh, this is awesome. It feels like this is so cool. It looks like a movie. And my professors were like, Larry, what are you doing? Like this is news. You can't, this is not how we do it. This is not, if you want to make movies, you're in the wrong part of California. Like Berkeley's up north, LA is down south. They're like, you're about 6 hours, in the wrong direction. You want to make movies, you shouldn't be here. And I was like, oh man, but like my classmates are loving it. What are you talking about? And as you're telling me that, you're smiling. I see it on your face. What are you talking about? And so I don't know. So I kept that with me. It was like, well, all right, maybe I should investigate that a little bit further. Then I graduated, and then I went on to my first big TV job. So never having been in a plane, going to California, all my classmates were like 5, 10 years older than me with tons of experience I didn't have. I was the youngest guy in my class by years. And then from there, I never really worked in TV before, but like newspapers were kind of like, they were dying out because of the internet. And so I was like, well, how do I make a living in journalism given the current state of affairs? This was back in 2008 when I graduated. So then from there, I'm like, well, broadcast seems fun. And, like TV seems more like there's more of a life to it than there are in print. But secretly in my back of my head, I was like, yeah, but it's closer to movies. It's not movies yet, but it's a little bit closer in that direction. Let me go pursue that. And then my first big job a year after graduation was MSNBC in New York. So back to New York, back to the East Coast, 30 Rock, like famous building where they film, Saturday Night Live, and like it's right across the street from Radio City Music Hall. It's like this like historic, like really famous building, a massive, 35, 40-story building. And I was a producer there for like 3 years. So what I did was I'd write news copy for anchors to read on the air. And I produced a segment, so I would cut sound bites. I would like look for footage and, kind of package it together and make it like TV friendly. But again, it felt like kind of like short films I was doing. It was like I'm taking all the media, all the sound bites, putting it together, writing a script, and then watching the anchor read it was to me like, this is an actor performing my dialogue kind of thing, right? So I did that for years, and I remember like, again, I just wasn't happy. Like I had a very well-paying job, and it was like,
You mentioned that. Sorry, you mentioned that, but can you be a bit more specific? How well paying was this job? Working in TV, is the money good? You said like you had a good job, and you kind of what were we looking at?
so just for comparison, right? So like all the print jobs I have been doing, so print newspapers, like traditional, I was 22, 23 at the time, I think. And I was making maybe like, if I made like 30 grand a year, that was a lot. And then in news, pretty quickly, I was making double that, like within my first few months there. I was like in the 60s. And then the path, like, so it's like, I was a segment producer. So like, those are the guys that write the copy for the anchors. Then there's line producer, there's supervising producer, then there's executive producer. But on that ladder, that climbing that corporate ladder, you can, within a few years, you could be making six figures, like, well into the six figures, like over the course of, maybe like within like 5 to 7 years, you're making really good money. It was there and it was laid out for me. It was like, this is the path. If you wanted to continue on this path is yours for as long as you want it. Right. And so, I had this really like difficult moment because I'm like, I know as far as my bank account is concerned, this is a good move for me. Like, stay here. You're already like, proven you can do the job really well. People here really like you. They like your work. Just ride this on out. And I just was like thinking about, if I stay here for the rest of my professional life, am I going to be happy? Am I going to like, well, what's that going to feel like? What is that going to do to me? And I was like, I, I was a little bit like scared of like, am I crazy for leaving this really like prestigious job that everyone's like, oh, you're lucky to have this job, right? And then I think that I couldn't reconcile that with like how I just felt about myself and the life that I wanted. And so everyone in my life, I was afraid to tell them what I was thinking about doing. I was thinking about leaving, just quitting and saying, I'm gonna write movies and figure it out. But I didn't want to tell anyone because they would I thought they were gonna laugh at me. And then I met my girlfriend. She was actually an intern at MSNBC. So that's how we met. And she shadowed me for like, her first couple weeks there on the job. And it's funny because like when you go into that place, like especially with the new people coming in, the new hires, it's this historic building and there's like that wow factor. Like people are coming in like, oh my God, I'm at 30 Rock. This is amazing. She came in and she was like, yeah, whatever. It's just a newsroom. Like, like that did not faze her at all. And so like we started talking and started becoming like friendly. And eventually we started to date. And like I told her like, hey, I'm thinking about leaving this place. And she's like, oh my God, good. Like leave. That place is not for you. Like you have so much more to offer than that place will allow you to offer. And so I was like, are you sure? And like, and because everyone else, I was terrified of telling them, but I was like, I told her, and then she was like, yeah, like that's the move. And so that kind of gave me like the little boost of confidence, that just enough that I needed to like go over that hump. And then I was like, all right. I started plotting and scheming, and then I was like, all right, like, okay, we go to LA, we'll do this. I'll empty out my bank account. We'll figure out like where we're gonna live and da da da. And then I remember I turned in my letter of resignation. So like I typed up a formal letter, and everyone was like, wait, you're quitting? Like what are you doing? At the time, I was working on 3 shows at the same time. And like that no one else at the network was doing that. It was just I was doing like the only guy, because like they liked me. They were like, oh, Larry can help out on this show and come in for the Saturday shows too. And so I had 3 different teams that were like, fans of mine. And they were like, why, where are you going? Like, why would you do that? And I was like, I think I'm gonna write movies. And they were like, you're gonna do what? I was like, I'm gonna write movies in LA. And they were like, do you know anyone? Do you have an agent? I was like, I don't know anybody, but I'm gonna figure it out. And so I handed him my letter. And then I remember the HR woman, she was like, okay, at the time I was like 28, I think. And she's like, all right, well, if you're going to do it, I guess now is the time. You're young. You don't have a mortgage. You don't have any kids. Like, go ahead and, best of luck to you. And then a week to the day from when I handed in that letter, I found out Natalie, my girlfriend, now wife, was pregnant. And so I was like, oh my God, I just quit this job. And I'll get a baby on the way. Like, oh, as I was freaking out. And then, but by this time I had told my family that I was quitting already. And then when they found out that she was pregnant, they're like, you can't go to LA now. You have to stay. Like you had that kid to worry about. And again, Natalie was the only one. She's like, no, we made a plan. Like the train's already left the station. Like we are going to go to LA. Like we'll do it. We'll figure it out together. And we went, and it was scary, but we figured it out. My son was born in Santa Monica.
So let me just jump in, because you said a lot there, and there's loads of points I want to touch upon. But I'm going to touch upon the last point. Then we're going to talk about the LA years, and then the rest. Firstly, Natalie sounds wonderful. Natalie sounds like a wonderful human. And they always say, behind every great man, there's a greater woman. She sounds like a wonderful, inspirational lady herself. So thank you, Natalie, because I don't meet Larry if she doesn't give you, encourage you to take this massive leap of faith. Question for you. You found out a week later that Natalie was pregnant. Let's say you found out the day before you're going to hand the resignation letter in. Do you still hand in the letter?
Well, I think I definitely would have thought twice about it. But again, she would have been like, no, we're doing this. Because I think I convinced her too. Like, and she was also looking for a change. And it was like, I think it'd be exciting to go on this adventure with you. And she's like, and we'd only been dating for like 2 years at the time. So it was still a pretty new relationship, like kind of learning, figuring each other out. And the fact that she trusted me to say, all right, I believe in you enough and I trust you enough that I'm going to take this massive leap of faith with you, I think spoke volumes to like who she is. And so I was like, all right, well, she believes in it, and so like again, it gave me just enough of a boost of confidence to say, hey, I think we can figure this out.
You get to LA, Tinseltown. Is it everything you expected, hoped, wanted, dreamt of?
Well, I mean, not at first. No, I mean not at first. No, it was very tough at
Because
first. I
everyone
mean,
goes to LA to become an actor, to
yeah,
become a movie star, to work in Hollywood. Everyone, it's a town as old as time. Right? Everyone does it. And funny you say that, right? So when going back a little bit, when I retired from boxing, I sat with my team, my boxing team, and we sat in the office, and I was like, right, now what's next? I was 30 years old. I was in the best physical shape of my life, of being basically blind in my left eye. And like, now what do I do? And I sat with my team, my agent Dean, who I respect and admire a lot, and we're very close. I said, I think I'm gonna be an actor. And he went, mate, I know exactly what he said. He said, mate, the world does not need another actor. And I went, but it's me. And I thought he was I thought he response, I thought he'd be like, oh yeah, if anybody can do it, you can do it. And then the kind of ultimately, like, it's something I've always, as you know, long to do. But I was young and I was healthy, and I had this, I'd created this fit, again, minus my eye, I had this really fit, healthy body, and I still hadn't scratched the itch of athleticism. Hence, I went down the professional wrestler route, which is like basically the bridge between boxing and acting is wrestling. It's just half sport, half acting, right? So for me, it's amazing. So I'm glad I went down this route anyway, like a little bridge maybe for the next career thereafter. But yeah, man, like you had the bottle, the balls, whatever, and it's to just go and do it, and you make that leap, and you did what a lot of people do, go to LA. How was it?
I don't know anyone, and I've got my pregnant girlfriend with me. She's like 4 months pregnant. I mean, she's really starting to show, and the whole time I'm stressing out of my mind. Like, how am I gonna make this work? How am I gonna support like my girlfriend and my soon to be son who's gonna be born any minute now? Like, there was a ticking clock. Yeah, I felt like I was in a movie. Like I'm trying to defuse a bomb before it blows up. Like so. I remember staying like I had all my savings, and like we had enough money to last maybe a couple of months out there before
It's not
finding
a long
work.
time, is it? It's not a long
Not at
time.
all.
Like, you
No,
really, you're
it
up
goes
against it. And LA,
yeah
brother, as
up
we
against
know,
it.
LA is expensive, man. I was there in November. LA is expensive. I mean, America's
So
expensive,
expensive.
but LA is expensive.
Yeah. And so we get over there, and I remember just to save money, like we were staying in some really crappy hotels, and like we must have had, I think, every other meal must have been like Denny's. It was like the diner, like cheap diner, like crappy food, and like just because it was cheap, and I'm like I can't keep feeding like Natalie and the baby Denny's like this greasy, awful diner food. I got to figure it out. So, luckily we found an apartment. I had to lie in the application about a job that I didn't have. So, oh yeah, I have a job. Yeah, don't worry. And so I paid, like the deposit and everything. And like after I handed him the check for the first month's rent and the deposit, I had maybe like, I don't know, $500 left in the bank. So I was like, I had enough for groceries and like not much
Not going
else.
far, is it? And correct me if I'm wrong, you basically emptied your bank account and you took your 401k, which in the UK is our pension, took an early pension, basically released to pay for your relocation to, and also people who from East Coast to West Coast in America, so people will understand how big of a jump it is, because UK is really small. Like, we can be in Scotland in 7 hours, 6 hours, right? So like,
Right.
in a different country, if we drove to across France in 7 hours, we were in Poland. We've gone through like 4 countries. How big America is. Recently, in December, I flew back from London to New York, and it was 7 hours and 15 minutes to fly from London to New York. I had a 5-hour wait in JFK, and I flew from New York to San Francisco. It took 6 hours and 45 minutes. It took 30 minutes longer to fly from London to New York than it did New York to California. That's how large America is as a country. So yeah, it was very much a relocation. Other side of the country, 3-hour time difference from your family, away from your parents. Big step, mate. Big, but and it got tough, right? But you ground it out.
So luckily, I was just applying for whatever job, I get. At first, I was doing like a telemarketing job for like 5 minutes just to get some income coming in. And luckily, I reached out to an old producer friend of mine that I met in the Bay Area, like that I worked with like briefly, like before the embassy job in New York. I worked like for like maybe like 4 months for this tiny little production company. in the Bay Area, called Indigo Films. And a producer there who I loved and like a really great guy, this guy Chris Lavelle. I read that they were opening up an office in LA, and so on a whim, I emailed him, and I hadn't spoken to Chris for maybe like three years at that point, maybe a little bit longer. And he emailed me back right away. I'm like, hey, I'm in LA. I read that you guys are opening up a new office down here. I'm looking for work. Do you have anything? And within 24 hours, he was like, yeah, perfect. Oh, great timing. We're actually starting this new like TV show, and you can be a researcher on it. How does $1,000 a week sound? And I was like, oh my God, like saved. I mean, literally saved like my life because I was like, I had no other money, and the telemarketing gig was like $8 an hour. So he's like, here's $1,000 a week to get started. And I was like, oh my God. So I'm like forever in that man's debt because like I mean, also made it possible for us to stay in California and for my wife to like, we had this beautiful UCLA Santa Monica, this beautiful hospital, like amazing care. And like, it was just, if he had not answered that email and given me that job, I don't know what would happen. So, that was the beginning of like, okay, like we're here and now what's going to be the next step?
So what was the next step? Because I know you struggled. I know like emotionally you struggled when you're in LA, weren't you? You weren't writing movies. You were working full time doing something you didn't really want to do. Explain what you did. Explain the true crime stuff you did.
So the company I worked for, it was they produce a lot of like documentary television. So a lot of like true crime stuff for Investigation Discovery, which is an offshoot of Discovery Channel, and they sort of primarily focus on like true crime stories. So like documentary shows where, for instance, like you would interview a prisoner, and then he would tell his life story, and then using a crew and actors, you would shoot what's called a reenactment. So like he's describing the crime that he committed, and then you get a crew and film the thing, and then like you cross cut between the real interview and like the reenactment. So I did that, and the money it paid well, but like I was doing that for like 4 years when I was in LA, and writing screenplays on the side. Every free moment I had when I wasn't raising my new son was trying to just like build up a body of work and sort of hone my craft because I knew that like I need to prove that I'm in this for the long haul. I'm not some fly by night type of guy. That I'm committed to the craft of screenwriting. I had to build up a stack of scripts to show like that I'm getting better and better. And like just teaching myself how to do it. But in order to do that and to stay in LA and pay the bills, I spent 4 years interviewing bank robbers and rapists and murderers and you name it, and like just some really horrific crimes that they told me about firsthand, and the type of stories that like you walk away from it and like it just does something to you on an emotional level. Like I love horror movies as a genre, but like it pales in comparison to like the true horror of like some of those stories that I heard. And so like when it comes to fictional horror, like sign me up, but that's great, I love that. But like the actual like real world stuff, there's a real sort of like a toll it takes on you when you engage with it for as long as I did. And like I think that after a while I was like, this is not I can't do this like for much longer. So that was a real struggle.
Mate, you moved back to PA, right? Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so we're in LA for about 5 years, and I was also the one thing I should also mention too was like because of the TV jobs, I was traveling all the time. I was like living out of suitcases and a lot. Like I'd be on the road for weeks at a time, away from Natalie and the baby, and like just it didn't seem worth it to me. I was like, I'm working so hard just to be able to live in this place, but I'm not with the people that I love, and I'm not doing the work that I love. So how do I fix that? So after a long talk, and we love California, but we're like, well, it just makes more sense for us to move back east. Much cheaper to live there, and I'll have much more time. I don't have to work quite so hard to pay the bills, and I can write the stuff that I want to write, and I can figure it out that way. So that's what we did.
You said I read in an article. You said that moved back with your parents and lived in the basement with your wife and your son.
At first, yeah, like before we got on our feet again, because that was yeah.
It had a big ego dent. Not your ego. You
Oh,
struggled emotionally.
massive ego dent. I mean, I felt like an absolute like failure. I mean, I was like, oh my God, like I was out there, and again, having all these jobs, it was similar to NBC. NBC, I had like good money, steady income. I was doing well, and then I left that. And then I was doing the true crime stuff, and that was more up and down because it was a freelance thing. It was like, I had to work as long as the shows continued to run. But even so, it just took a really heavy kind of like emotional toll on me. And I was like, this is just not right either. So we left, and then we're back, we're on the East Coast again. And my parents, again, God bless them. Like, I feel so lucky to have the parents that I have, because they were like, well, all right, listen, like, don't worry about it. Come back in, we'll help you out. And then when you're back on your feet, then, you can go on your way with our blessing. And so we did that for a little while. And in coming back, I had a lot more time than I had before. And so I wrote a bunch of new material. And one of which became a script that got to the hands of Universal. And then they hired me to write 2 other movies, and then so that kind of set me off on this whole other path that I'm on now. But that would not have been possible had it not been for that move back east.
Moving out west to LA, you needed that in your life to grow.
Yeah.
You needed that in your life to grow and to figure out what you didn't want. Again, then it's just I think it's really fascinating. I think we as a society, we spend time in places we don't really want to be, and not wanting to be there, but ultimately we often need these experiences to grow, so we know where we want to go.
Right.
And I think that's really fascinating. And also having a strength for character to leave New York, a well-paying job where your life is potentially like mapped out for you, to go and do the scary thing in LA. And I mean, just taking that leap of faith is amazing. Then having the strength for character to go, no, this isn't what I want to do. I'm living in LA in a nice apartment and everything, but like, I'm not happy. Then going back, or taking that, sometimes you've got to step back to your forwards, haven't you? And that sounds like something definitely that you did. Can we talk about 5 O'Clock Shadows?
Yes.
So this is the movie that we worked on together. So we worked on together. You worked on. You invited me to be part of your amazing casting. They are a wonderful cast. Some of the guys, the girls and guys you worked with on that are just stellar. So talk about how we met.
So I was looking. So I wrote this crazy character. I mean, I won't give away too much plot details wise, but like I wrote this. Tommy Knuckles is his name. He's a boxer. So I'm casting people because I was doing like pretty much a proof of concept. So for those who don't know, a proof of concept is essentially what you show to people to get financing for a project. So you say, all right, here's a script. I want to show you what it might look and feel like to give you a better sense of what you might be paying for. So it could be a trailer, it could be storyboards, it could be like there's many ways to do it. I was gonna do it doing a trailer and doing this crazy table read video. So I recorded a table read over Zoom with Mr. Gogo here and the rest of the cast. And like kind of just like reading the whole script from top to bottom, acting it out, and then like kind of like filling it, bringing it to life with like animation and sound effects and music.
It's so good. It's gonna get done. It's gonna get done. 100%.
It has to get done. It's going to. And so I was trying to like, I was trying to audition actors, and like for each of there's 5 main characters. So I was trying to like audition for all of them. And I was looking for a guy to play Tommy Knuckles. It was a very particular, very specific role that not anyone can do. Like, it's very specific. And I was trying to find people and auditioning some people, and they just were not, it didn't come to life. It didn't leap off the page the way it had to. And so I started leaning on some of my actor friends. And so Isadora Leyva, who is an actress I worked with on Death of a Fool, this film that I produced with a buddy of mine in Miami. She was an actor on that, and just talking to her, hey, do you know any, actors that like, British, big, like tough-looking guys who like might be able to fill the role? She goes, actually, I know the perfect guy, and his name was Anthony Gogo. And she's like, I'll put you guys in touch. I was like, okay. And then you and I met, and then I had you send me an audition tape. And from the minute, from minute 1, I was like watching you perform this monologue. I'm like, that's it. Like there's some people where you don't have to teach them how to act. You just put a camera in front of them and let them do the rest. And I think you were very much that type of guy. So just watching your audition tape and finding out after the fact that you hadn't done any real acting besides like wrestling, I was even more impressed. I'm like, oh, so you're still raw, like you're still learning. Imagine how good you can be like with some more experience. So I was like, all right, like you have the intangible, like the sort of it factor, like the thing that cannot be taught. Like you have that in spades. So I was like, all right, well, he's my Tommy Knuckles. And so we started working together, and like that's kind of how it kicked off.
Man, that's so cool. Thank you so much for the kind words. Really appreciate that. I thought that character was stellar. I read the script. I was like, oh, I need to pay this guy. I need to pay this guy. Remember, you sent me over the thing. I found an acting studio in Atlanta where I am, and done auditions. And oftentimes, like, when you do an audition, it's like you don't want to do as an actor. When you get an audition, get a script, you read it, and most people are going to do it a certain way. Because ultimately, as an actor, you get a script, you get the words. For those that don't know, and like most people are going to do it a certain way. And then if a casting director, they get 100 scripts and 97 are the same, but 3 are different, they're going to be more drawn to the different one, aren't they? It's like, oh, that's a bit different. I didn't see it that way. And oftentimes, what the acting coaches tell us in class, oftentimes the casting directors aren't too sure what they want. And to me, how true this is, obviously is personal. So like, just give them something that they might think, oh, I like that even more than what was in my head. So then remember, Larry, you said to me when you said, be big with it. I mean, the words were big. And also the age-old thing, if someone says to you, if the words are, I'm going to fucking kill you, you piece of shit. Like, in an argument, you might go, I'm going to fucking kill you, you piece of shit, and shout it. But it's almost more sinister saying, I'm going to fucking kill you, you piece of shit. Doing the quiet and low. Oh, it has a different ring to it. But you said to me, so I looked at the script and thinking, I want to go different and do a bit different. Then you said to me, nah, mate, be big with it, be liberal with it. Fuck, mate, I'll be liberal. And I remember I did a few different takes, and you were like, yeah, this is cool. So, man, that was great. And I really and then, so when you cast me in the role, and I thought, bloody, I've got to learn how to wax now. I'm not going to be in a movie. They've been to an acting class in my life, so I went to an acting class, and I'm still go there. I met actually a previous guest on the podcast, Scott Oakley's my acting coach, brilliant guy. Got an acting coach in London as well, Richard, who's an amazing guy as well. And mate, you, it's something I've always wanted to do, but nothing. I was wasting that kind of little smack on the butt to go and do it. And you very much gave me that smack on the butt to go and do, and I want to thank you for that, because it's generally one of my favorite things I get to do now is acting. And whether I become a massive star or not, I just really enjoy doing it. I enjoy telling stories, but I enjoy being being the instrument of the story, getting out to the world, and I think it's fascinating. Mate,
And you're great at it too. So continue. Please continue.
Thank you, sir. Actually, funny little story. So I mentioned Scott. I didn't know Scott. I just called up the closest acting studio to me, or the highest rated one in Atlanta, in Buckhead. And I called up, and a guy called Scott answers, nicest guy in the world. But I didn't know this at the time. It sounded nice on the phone, but still, you don't know what someone's like over the phone. Then we spoke, and you said to me, you went, there's a beginner, intermediate, and advanced class in my acting school. Then you said to me, oh yeah, go to the advanced class. And I was like, I've never been to acting. I can't go to the advanced class. Never been to acting. You started to just push yourself. I went, all right. So I called Scott. He must have thought, what a dickhead. I called Scott all bold as brass. Oh, Scott, I went down to my own. Go, I'm Olympic boxer. I'll drop in the Olympic boxing. I've been on TV and stuff. I'm now a wrestler, been on TV. So he said, have you acted before? I went, wow, mate. Every day's an act, isn't it? And I give him one of those really shit generic responses, like I know what I'm talking about. Every day they said, but have you acted before? I went, well, not really. No, potato, not really, but no, kind of. He said, well, there's a beginner class on Monday. And I went, well, can I come to the advanced class on Wednesday? He said, we haven't acted before. I said, but I'm good. I sound like an absolute idiot. I said, but I'm good. Because you told me I was good. And he said, okay, do you know how to cheat? And I thought, it's a trick question. Is it like, I didn't ask, so I said, so do you know how to cheat? I said, no, I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to come in, I'm going to try really hard. Now, obviously, everyone, any actor in here, cheating means open your body up so the audience can see you and the person. So you're not standing obviously side on so the camera can't see you or the person. And that just gave away. I had no idea how to act. He said, mate, he said, come to the beginner class on Monday, then we'll see where we go. I did one beginner class. He moved me to intermediate class straight away. And and I'm still there, but I enjoyed that class more than advanced anyway, so I don't care. But so yeah, man. So thank you so much. I got from our interaction, I got to meet some really cool people that I really respect and admire and look up to. And my life is way richer now because of meeting yourself and the people that I've met, because of you. So I really appreciate that. So like, you're your first screenplay at 28 years old, a young man, but not a youngster. Lived a fair bit of life. Why did it? Why did you wait so long?
I think I was just working up sort of the confidence to even try. I think for years and years, especially coming from where I come from, like no one has any industry experience at all. No one like I just didn't know how to make it possible. It seemed like I had a better chance of becoming an astronaut than becoming a filmmaker or a screenwriter. So it just never seemed like possible, and so in a real tangible way. So I think that journalism was sort of my way to scratch that storytelling itch that was accessible to me at the time. Now, the part of me does regret that I started so late, but also I think because of my experiences in the 10 years like as a journalist and then doing the investigative reporting stuff and that experience, I think it adds an element to my writing that most people don't have. I think that's what sets me apart from the pack. And so all that stuff, I don't think any of that time was wasted. I think it was just like sort of like molding me into the person that I meant to become. But I will say for anyone listening who's on the fence about it, I think if you are like burning up to do this thing, whatever it may be, if it's creative or whatever it may be, um, you have to silence the voices of doubt and just go for it. Because if you don't, then you play it safe, you will ultimately regret it, I think, forever. And so it's about finding a way that's actionable and that like makes you feel whole. And like, it's incredibly challenging. It's not easy. It's certainly not for the faint of heart. I mean, God knows I've struggled and like we've covered those struggles, but I think that for anyone who's, the kind of debating or like letting other people's voices enter their mind, and those voices are louder than your own, I think that's a sign that you have to sort of like filter that stuff out because do you want to live your life based upon, your ideals and your principles, or do you want to do it to satisfy someone else's? And so I think that's the biggest takeaway for me. So go ahead and do it.
Go out and do it. And I think people often wait for the right time,
Yeah.
The fact is, there's never going to be a right time. There's never really a right time. There's never a right time to have a child. There's always another bill coming. There's always this, that, the other. And the child analogy is a great one because there's always something. It's the right time when you make it the right time. And whether it's a child or becoming a screenwriter or changing job or doing something, like there's never going to be a right time. You've got to make it happen. It's the right time when you say and you plant a seed and you commit to it and follow through. And yes, it's scary. Yes, it's daunting. Yes, you're going to doubt yourself, but you just got to do it anyway. And I'm so glad you got here where you are. I think you're right. I think your stories, because you lived life, because you went through struggle and setback in those in between years where you were kind of unsure what to do, that adds to your writing. It's experience. It's life experience, isn't it? It's life experience. You're way more life experience at 28 than you have at 21 because you've lived 7 more years over a very pivotal 7-year period. So if you are waiting at home, waiting to take that leap of faith, wherever it may be, I again urge you, obviously sensibly, take the leap of faith, wherever it may be. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to be back where you were anyway, but at least you tried. At least you had a go. And that's the thing. I mean, like, life isn't a race. Like, as long as we get there in the end, it doesn't really matter. The journey, and there's certain elements of beauty in the journey, in the struggle. The hard times often, when you look back, when you're out of it, when you're in it, of course, doesn't seem beautiful when you're in it because you're in it and it's a bit shit. But when you look back in years to come, you can see so much beauty in those hard years. You can gain so much strength. And when I had my eye, actually, I had my eye was bad before I had my eye in 2016, retired from boxing in 2019, was really in a hole until 2021, really. So for 5 years, I was in a hole. And when I was in that, I wouldn't have wished it upon anybody. I hated it. My life was miserable. I was really struggling. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to go back there. But looking back now, there's some beautiful parts in that struggle. I learned a lot about myself in that, which I wouldn't have learned if my life was all rosy and fantastic. So I'm really pleased by that, mate. I'm glad we've chatted today for a few reasons. One, because I don't doubt that one day you're going to blow up massive and be massive big time. And you're going to be like, Anthony Agogo, who's that? Podcast? Get him back up. Nah, mate, far too busy. I'm going around Spielberg's house for breakfast. So I think I'm glad I got you now when you got the time for me. And secondly, on that point, I mean, a lot of, and we discussed this actually before we spoke, a lot of screenwriters, or not even screenwriters, let's just talk holistically. A lot of people have their stories told once they've climbed their Mount Olympus. Boxers, footballers, like screenwriters, whoever it is. Once you've done a great thing, you come and you talk about your great thing and all the things you did. And oftentimes, right, when you do that, because this time has gone by since you achieved that great thing or did that great thing, you kind of tell it differently because you remember it differently. And that's natural. Over time goes by, you remember things differently. Maybe those curtains weren't blue, maybe they were green, maybe it wasn't a Wednesday, maybe it was a Friday. You just tell things differently, like intentionally or unintentionally. And the great thing is, I mean, when you're in the midst of it, you're very much still in the trenches, quote unquote. I don't mean to disparage soldiers that fight in trenches, obviously, but when you're in it, it's even more beautiful because we're in it now. We're living it. You are 2 weeks away from being told by Universal that like 5 o'clock, it's not happening. Well, not now with us anyway, So very much in it still. So I'm glad we're chatting, and maybe do you want to chat about that? Chat some of your experiences like now, rather than 5 years time. You make the movie, you win a ton of awards. You cast Michael B. Jordan instead of me, you bastard. So,
Never, no. No, I mean, look, I mean, this will be interesting to look back on, like when the movie finally gets made, we can come back and refer back to this. But I think, like you're right. I think usually you hear stories that happen, once they've crossed the finish line. And I think I'm still very much in the race, still very much in the trenches, still trying to figure it out, like dealing with these setbacks. And I think that is the life of a filmmaker. I mean, of any, creative person. I think that you're trying to always like climb up that mountain. You're pushing a boulder up a hill every day, inch by inch by inch. And like, it's not sexy to see the guy struggling in the middle. It's sexy to see, once he's already won and has all the accolades. But I think that this is the sort of proving ground that, like, I think, you get through the struggles, you sort of earn your stripes, so to speak. Like you build tough skin to be able to endure whatever comes after. And I think that like that part of the process is, I think, pivotal for anyone. I mean, you have to really kind of put yourself through the fire, and try to prove, but before you prove anybody else wrong, you got to prove yourself right. You got to say, hey, like, I believe in this thing. I'm going to do this because I have to see it through, whatever comes of it, good, bad, or otherwise. But as long as you can say, like, I've done everything that I can do, I think you can sort of, like, be satisfied at some level with that. But I think that, just to be clear to the audience, like, I'm still very much in that phase right now. So when I come out of it, we can talk about it after the fact and compare, then to now, or what have you. But I think, this is not something that's like, this is it's so bad, it's painful. Like, it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to be painful. Like, this is not a bug. This is a feature of the whole process. And so I think that when you have to just embrace it, embrace the suck, embrace the hardship, because like it's going to come. And the reason why it's going to come is because the end thing that you're chasing is so worthwhile that of course it would be hard. How wouldn't it be hard? So, you got to just buck up and do it. And that's where I'm at, day by day, figuring it out, making my way. And we'll get to that mountaintop eventually. But like this moment here, I want to be careful to not take it for granted, because ultimately this is what makes, like we said before, this is what makes the juice worth the squeeze.
Oh man, it's got goosebumps in that last sentence. And that brings us back to the beginning. I'm really annoyed. I want to ask you one more question. And I'm annoyed because that was a perfect end. I'm going to ask you anyway. You mentioned it briefly earlier. And I want to just jump on it for maybe 60 seconds. Rejection. You get a lot of no's. Constantly getting no's. Getting a yes in Hollywood, in acting, in the film industry, is the weird bit. It's the odd bit. It's the anomaly. Getting a yes. What do you mean yes? Like, is it not a no? It's normally a no. How do you bounce back from all those no's when you work so hard? How do you bounce back?
Well, I think for me, I mean, it comes down to like the people who are the people telling me no, right? Like, they don't have the context that I have. They don't have like they've got by and large like like they've got sort of corporate directives like like hey we want to just keep our job and keep the machine going and like like they're like we mentioned before a bit about like the industry as a whole being very risk averse, and so they're coming at it from a very like corporate standpoint. I'm the creative. I'm coming from an artistic standpoint. Like you may not it may not fit your corporate agenda, your mandate, but like I know what dope is. Like I know how I feel about it. Like you have to trust yourself as an artist too. Like just because these guys are saying no, they're not. How do I put it? Like I think there's a conversation that I had with someone. I won't mention who, but like it was kind of a back and forth, and they mentioned like they used the word visionary, and like oh like you're a visionary. Like you can do all these things, and like it's incredible. But I'm like. But the thing that no one talks about being a visionary is like, and I'm not calling myself that. I'm saying like this conversation that someone had with me. The thing with like being a visionary is like, it by definition it means seeing things that no one else can see, right? And so when people say, "Oh yeah, we love your crazy ideas," or whatever, but like they can't see it because they're not built to see it. Like they're not equipped to see it, and so you're always going to be shouting into a hurricane in some respects because you're dealing with people that are not the most creative people. And so when they tell you no, just remember who they are and who you are. Like you are the one that makes things like without people like me, there is no movie business. There is no industry. There's nothing to sell, to produce. There's nothing. And so I think that you have to really sort of like as an artist, really be courageous in your idea, your point of view. And like people are going to tell you that you're crazy, but of course they are, because they're not inside your head. They can't see the way that you see it. And so I think that you just have to like, it's very easy to get your heart broken in this business if you just if you take cues from everyone else. And I think that you have to just say, well, just because we did like you think differently doesn't mean that I'm wrong per se. It just means that we think differently, and that's okay too. I believe in my ideas on myself so strongly that like eventually they'll come around or they won't, but like I'm gonna make my thing because like I can't not do it. It's this compulsion that I can't. It would make my life lesser if I didn't do these things.
I've loved the chat today, Larry. I wish you all the very best in everything you do moving forwards. I urge you to keep me in mind when you're writing new characters. Where can the people follow you and find you and watch your stuff?
I'm on Instagram, LV Santana 326. That's my handle. And that's pretty much it for the socials. I don't really engage with social media too much, but yeah, if you want to drop me a line on there, like I'm happy to chat with fellow creatives.
Mate, thank you so much. You are a top guy. So passionate about what you do. Such a nice person, and I want every nice person on the planet to get everything that they want to get. And again, I said at the very beginning, and I really mean that you're a dreamer. And everything we see around us, everything we see, I'm looking at a teleprompter right there, so I'm doing some work later on it. And somebody once dreamt that, and now it's in existence. Like everything we see was once a dream. So keep dreaming, and the hard work plus the dreams make things become a reality. And like you mentioned, it changes the world. Mate, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thank you. This was so much fun, man. I appreciate it. This was a blast.
Personally, I love Larry. I think he's an absolute wonderful person, so unbelievably talented. And I urge you to follow him and to check out his work. He really is, he's a star waiting to become a superstar. Well done, Larry, mate. I really enjoyed your conversation with me, and I really enjoyed our time on the podcast. And for me, the takeaway, I mean, there's many takeaways in that podcast, but for me, I meant it when I said it. Larry's a dreamer, okay? And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Everything we see on this planet was once a dream. Somebody dreamt it, and through hard work and belief, it came to fruition. Like Larry said, dreamers, they change the world. And he very much is that. And for me, I urge you this next coming week to channel your inner Larry. Go back to being a dreamer. Before, however, the knocks of life kind of like iron out those dreams. Go back to being a kid. Go back to dreaming and chasing those dreams with work ethic, with desire and with belief, and just see what you can get to. Guys, this week, this month, this year, you may get knocked down. Life might punch you right on the jaw and knock you down. If that happens, then remember, there's only one option, and that's always to get back up. Stay in the fight until now and next week. And don't forget, I will see you next week. Take care, guys.